Two scientists from the United States and Japan have won this year's Nobel Prize for Medicine. The work of James Allison and Tasuku Honjo in the 1990s led to new and dramatically improved therapies for cancers by harnessing and manipulating people's immune system. It also led to the creation of a multi-billion-dollar market for new cancer medicines, which offers new treatments for patients with melanoma, lung and bladder cancers. The powerful typhoon Trami has torn through Japan. At least 2 people have been killed and dozens are injured. The typhoon has knocked out power to 450,000 households in Tokyo and its surrounding areas. Public transport across the nation has been severely disrupted. Train services in the Tokyo metropolitan area were cancelled at around 8 p.m. local time on Sunday. Kansai International Airport in Osaka suspended all flights. Trami made landfall on Sunday evening in West Japan before carving a path through parts of Honjo, including Tokyo. It's packing winds of up to 160 kilometers per hour. Indonesian authorities are scrambling to get help into the quake-hit Sulawesi island. Survivors continue to stream away from their ruined homes in remote areas. On Monday, volunteers began burying bodies in a mass grave to prevent outbreaks of disease. The official death toll stands at 844, but it's certain to rise as rescuers reach devastated outlying communities.
Hello and welcome to NHK Newsline. I'm Raja Pradhan with the news from Tokyo. A Japanese molecular immunologist is sharing this year's Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. Tasuku Honjo and American James P. Allison are being honored for research that led to a revolutionary cancer therapy.
The Nobel Assembly at Karolinska Institutet has today decided to award the 2018 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine jointly to James P. Allison and Tasuku Honjo.
Honjo's research focuses on antibodies and immune responses. He discovered a protein that functions as a brake on the immune system. Allison found that by releasing such a brake, immune cells could be unleashed to attack tumors. The discovery has been crucial in the development of immunotherapy, which is considered the 4th generation of cancer care following surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. Honjo graduated from Kyoto University before moving to the United States in 1971 for research. He returned to his alma mater in 1982, where he's now a distinguished professor at the university's Institute for Advanced Study.
I
think it was around 5 p.m. I received a phone call from an acquaintance at the Nobel Foundation. I was very surprised. It came out of the blue. I was in my room discussing a thesis with my younger colleagues. It was an unexpected phone call.
Honjo says he's pleased his research has led to a breakthrough in the field.
I am pleased the very basic studies I have been carrying out since 1992 have been applied to clinical treatment as a new cancer therapy. Sometimes people tell me they were able to overcome serious illness thanks to my work. That's when I realize my research was significant, and that makes me happy. On top of that, I think I am very lucky to be able to win such an honorable prize. I want to continue my research so immunotherapy can save more cancer patients.
This is how the therapy works. When a pathogen, such as a virus, enters the human body, it's attacked by immune cells. But for some reason, they're unable to fight cancer cells. Honjo discovered why. A protein called PD-1 acts as a brake on the immune system. The cancer cells use it to protect themselves. Honjo's discovery led to the idea of covering the switch, blocking the cancer cells from activating it. This was behind the development of the drug Optivo, which has had impressive results. Honjo sent out a message for children who hope to follow in his footsteps.
Never lose your sense of wonder. Do not believe everything you read in textbooks. Always be skeptical and question what is really going on. That means don't be easily convinced or give up until you see things with your own eyes.
Honjo is the 26th Nobel winner born in Japan. He's the 5th in the category of physiology or medicine, following Yoshinori Osumi in 2016. And people around Japan have been reacting to the news. A Kyoto University student had this to say.
He's a very famous professor, and people have always been saying he might get the Nobel someday. I want to congratulate him for actually winning it.
2012 prize winner Shinya Yamanaka released a statement saying he's been waiting every year for Honjo to win it and is excited for him. He says Honjo's work has provided a beacon of light for people battling cancer around the world. He adds the discovery was something all medical researchers were hoping for, and they share pride in his achievement. The Nobel Prize organization posted a picture on Twitter of Honjo smiling with his team at Kyoto University right after they got the news. The death toll from Typhoon Cha-mi has risen to 4. People throughout Japan are assessing the damage from the powerful storm. Cha-mi tore across much of the archipelago from Sunday to Monday morning, injuring 205 people. Rescue teams are still searching for a missing woman. The typhoon caused massive transportation disruptions across the country. The start of the Monday morning commute in Tokyo was chaotic. While some train services were back up and running, others were still delayed. There were long lines and big crowds as the country's massive capital region tried to go about its business. Airlines canceled about 280 domestic flights on Monday. And Shinkansen bullet trains have now resumed full operations. In the Tokyo region, the storm packed record-breaking winds that topped 160 kilometers per hour. The gusts toppled trees, traffic lights, and some vehicles. The typhoon also caused a massive power outage. A clinic in Aichi Prefecture is asking some patients to stay home. Without power, dialysis machines are not working, so people who rely on them have to go without.
We've never experienced such a blackout at this clinic before. Things are a little hectic.
The power outages also forced some schools to close. The storm caused flooding in parts of the country, including the southwestern prefecture of Miyazaki. A river overflowed its banks and flooded houses. There have also been reports of landslides in the region. This one blocked a road in Saga Prefecture. Police say no one was injured. Evacuation orders have mainly been lifted. At one point, hundreds of thousands of people were told to leave their homes. Rescue workers in Indonesia are racing against the clock after an earthquake and tsunami killed more than 800 people, and the number is expected to rise. Rosalind Devavali at our bureau in Bangkok has the details.
Officials are frantically searching for survivors on the island of Sulawesi. It's been over 72 hours since the disaster, and their survival window is getting smaller and smaller for those still trapped. A magnitude 7.5 quake struck Friday, triggering a 3-meter-high tsunami. It washed away large swaths of 2 cities near the center of the island. Authorities say 844 people have died and more than 600 others are severely injured. Many are still believed to be trapped under collapsed buildings. Officials say they pulled one woman in her 20s out of the rubble. She was immediately sent to hospital. The head of Indonesia's search and rescue agency says time is critical to finding others alive and that heavy equipment is on the way to help.
Today some heavy equipment has come, so we're focusing on collapsed buildings. 3 items of heavy equipment have arrived, 2 excavators and 1 bulldozer, and there's a helicopter that can reach isolated areas.
The twin disasters have left a lasting impact on the land and people. Nearly 50,000 have been displaced.
I was at home when the earthquake hit. After it struck, I ran out of the house with my friends. I still feel traumatized because aftershocks are still happening.
To make matters worse, a crisis is slowly unfolding as food and fuel shortages are leading to looting. And if that wasn't enough, officials have another issue to deal with. More than 1,000 prisoners have reportedly escaped from jail after the quake. The government has deployed thousands of military and police officers to maintain security. We spoke with one of the survivors of the disaster. Franz Pada-Demon was
2 scientists who discovered how to harness the body's natural immune systems to fight cancer have won this year's Nobel Prize for Medicine. James Allison of the United States and Tasuku Honjo of Japan will share the prize money. Their work is changing the way cancer drugs are designed, with some positive results being seen already. Radab Abbas has more.
It's a groundbreaking body of work that has been credited with saving lives and changing the course of medicine.
The Nobel Assembly at Karolinska Institutet has today decided to award the 2018 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine jointly to James P. Allison and Tasuku Honjo for their discovery of cancer therapy by inhibition of negative immune regulation.
The achievements of the immunologists in the 1990s led to improved therapies for diseases, including melanoma and lung cancer. They discovered how to manipulate the immune system to fight the disease. James Allison, professor at University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, worked on a protein known as CTLA4 and realized that if blocked, a brake would be released, unleashing the immune cells to attack tumors. Honjo's research has focused on antibodies and immune responses. His findings made a significant contribution in explaining how antibodies respond to certain viruses and bacteria.
People tell me they have recovered from grave illnesses and become healthy thanks to my treatment method, and that they owe it to me. That, above everything else, makes me realize that my research has been truly meaningful, which makes me happy. I would like to continue with my research so that this immune treatment can save more cancer patients.
The 9 million kroner prestigious prize will be shared by both scientists.
All right, let's get some business news for you now. Kate Moody has joined us in the studio. Hello there, Kate.
Hi, Laura.
And it's goodbye to NAFTA and hello to a new trade treaty between the US, Canada and Mexico. Tell us more.
That's right, and it doesn't really roll off the tongue, I have to say. It's the USMCA. That's what negotiators from the US, Mexico and Canada have come up with after months of rocky negotiations. This new trade agreement will reduce tariffs and facilitate business across their borders, replacing the NAFTA agreement, which dates back to 1994. In addition to key sticking points in the auto and dairy sectors, negotiators have found a middle ground on labor and environmental rights and intellectual property protection. And Donald Trump had threatened to withdraw from what he has repeatedly called a terrible trade deal if the new terms weren't to his satisfaction. But he's described the new USMCA as a wonderful treaty, which he claims will make North America into a manufacturing powerhouse. Take a listen.
I'll tell you, it's turned out to be a very, very good deal for both, and a very, very good deal for all three. It puts us in a position that we've never been in before. It's very good when you look at the world and what the world is doing, and when you look at the unfair trade practices that countries are using against the United States. This is a terrific deal.
So, just what do we know about this new deal? Francois Weibo has been finding out.
A new deal for North America to regulate over $1 trillion in annual trade between Canada, Mexico and the United States. One priority for negotiators was the automobile industry. Under the previous deal, customs duties only applied to cars if less than 62.5% of their parts were produced within North America. That threshold's been raised to 75%. An additional requirement, 20% of these parts must be made by workers earning at least $16 an hour. A provision that'll hit the lower-wage Mexican labor market the hardest, as Washington hopes to repatriate manufacturing jobs to the U.S. Ottawa's agreed to ease protections for their dairy producers. Canadian milk is heavily subsidized and the tariffs for foreign imports are prohibitively high. Now American farmers will have a greater access to the $16 billion milk market to their north. The new agreement also contains a sunset clause, which means it'll be valid only for a 16-year period and will have to be renegotiated and approved every 6 years. Finally, the trilateral deal will be renamed the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Trump had explicitly vowed to scrap NAFTA, and in this sense, he'll have technically succeeded. But before claiming victory, the deal will first have to pass through Congress.
Let's check in on the day's trading action now. Wall Street has welcomed that new trade deal. Investors pleased that one area of uncertainty, at least, has now been resolved. Big manufacturers like Ford, General Motors, and Boeing all rising about 1%. That's pushed the Dow Jones up strongly there. It was a mixed close for the major European markets. The DAX and CAC 40 with a positive finish earlier on. Stocks in Milan lagged behind as banks extended their losses. This as European finance ministers expressed concerns about the coalition government's new budget proposal. Ryanair was the biggest loser of the day. Its shares dropped 12% after the low-cost carrier issued a profit warning linked to ongoing strikes. General Electric has announced it's replacing its chief executive, John Flannery, after just 14 months on the job. His successor, Larry Culp, is a member of the board, but is seen as an outsider to the group. GE shares rose as much as 12% this Monday. They have lost 54% of their value in the past 12 months, though. The 2015 purchase of the French group Alstom's power business has added costs and factories as the 128-year-old conglomerate goes through a painful restructuring process, trying to transform its industrial base into a high-tech leader. Tesla shares have recovered after something of a roller coaster weekend. They're trading up about 16% this hour, having dropped slightly less than that on Friday. This weekend, founder and CEO Elon Musk announced that he'd reached a deal with U.S. financial regulators, which will see his company and him personally each pay a $20 million fine. He'll also be stepping down as chairman, but remain as chief executive. Authorities had launched an investigation into a tweet he sent in August, claiming he had secured funding to take the electric car maker private before backtracking several days later. The company has also been under pressure for its performance. Reports emerging this Monday that it has reached its target of producing at least 50,000 of its affordable Model 3 electric cars between the period of July and September. That will be confirmed later this week. We'll have to wait a little bit longer to see, Laura, just how the company reinvents itself once Elon Musk really leaves the helm.
$20 million, that's a pretty expensive tweet, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Ouch. All right,
Makes you think before hitting that button.
Yeah, maybe some people should think a bit more. All right, thank you very much indeed. Kate Moody there with the business. We'll catch up with Kate later.
Hello, I'm Barbara Serra. You're watching Al Jazeera live from London. Also coming up on the programme. Indonesia rushes to get aid and equipment to Sulawesi Island as victims of Friday's earthquake and tsunami are buried in mass graves. Bolivia's president says he'll keep fighting for sea access despite losing a legal challenge to force Chile to negotiate. And Lebanon's foreign minister takes ambassadors on a tour of the places Israel says are hiding Hezbollah missile sites. Hello, thank you for joining us. The U.S. president has praised the trade deal that he struck with Canada to replace NAFTA, calling it the biggest trade deal in U.S. history. It keeps the two countries and Mexico in a three-way economic pact first reached 24 years ago. Donald Trump came to office promising to scrap the original deal. The new agreement was sealed at late-night talks in Ottawa after more than a year of intense negotiations.
It's my great honor to announce that we have successfully completed negotiations on a brand new deal to terminate and replace NAFTA. and the NAFTA trade agreements with an incredible new US-Mexico-Canada agreement called USMCA. It sort of just works, MCA. The agreement will govern nearly $1.2 trillion in trade, which makes it the biggest trade deal in the United States history.
Well, the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement replaces the 1994 pact governing more than $1.2 trillion worth of trade between the nations. There are 34 chapters, but the key issues can be summed up in 3. Number 1, dairy. Canada has long been protective of its $16 billion dairy industry, but it's finally agreed to give U.S. farmers access to 3.5% of the market following their long-standing complaints about high tariffs. Number 2, cars. The deal has made it so that 40% of car and truck parts have to be made in the 3 countries, with workers paid a wage of $16 an hour. Canada and Mexico have also been given a quota of 2.6 million cars that they can export to the U.S. tariff-free. Number 3, wood. Canada has kept a dispute settlement mechanism which allows it to challenge U.S. anti-dumping tariffs and save its lucrative softwood lumber exports. Rosalind Jordan has more now from Washington, D.C.
Donald Trump is taking what many people are calling a victory lap on this Monday. He has achieved an agreement with Canada and with Mexico on a deal to replace NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. Trump had campaigned against the deal since he first announced he was running for president in 2015 as one that was bad for U.S. workers, particularly those who worked in manufacturing and those who worked in the agricultural sector. The new agreement, if it's ratified by all 3 countries' governments, would actually make it easier for the U.S. to not only sell its goods to these other 2 countries, but it would also remove some tariffs on Canadian and Mexican-made products up to a certain point. What Canada gets out of the deal is the retention of an independent arbitrator in case there are disputes between the 3 countries, and it's not going to open its dairy sector to whole-scale U.S. dairy imports. But the U.S. will get a toehold, and that was considered important. One thing that is also important is that the U.S. and Canada said that people who work in the automotive sector should be getting paid at least $16 an hour. That could cut both ways from Mexico, because right now, Mexican auto workers are paid considerably less than their counterparts in the U.S. and Canada. If companies decide that it's worth keeping these workers on the job, they will have to raise their salaries. Otherwise, Mexican auto workers could find themselves looking for new jobs if the companies decide that it's not worth the cost of doing production in that country. But that said, all 3 countries now agree that they have a deal. They agree that it's a time for an update. The next update, should it be ratified, will come in about 6 years' time. And there's a 16-year sunset provision in which, if they don't make any changes, the trade deal would go away, and then they'd have to start all over again.
That's the view from Washington. Let's cross to Daniel Lack. He's live for us in Toronto. Daniel, it was very important for the Canadian Prime Minister to get a deal in place to replace NAFTA if that was going to be scrapped. And we heard from Justin Trudeau a few hours ago. What did he have to say in response to the crafting of this new deal?
Well, Barbara, he's putting a very brave face on this negotiation. The Canadians have been at this for more than a year, with first their Mexican and U.S. counterparts, and then when Mexico and the U.S. reached their own deal in August, I think it caught the Canadians by surprise, and they intensified their talks with Washington, and eventually, as you said, coming to an agreement late on Sunday night, a deadline that President Trump had set. Justin Trudeau knows that he has to get not just the trade deal with the United States right, but also the entire relationship. And it's been a rather fraught one with President Trump. The 2 men, Justin Trudeau and President Trump, started off talking nicely to each other and talking about how easy it would be to get a new trade deal. And then things went from pretty good to bad to worse over the ensuing months. Even Mr. Trump referred to Mr. Trudeau and said, "We've had our bad times, but this is a good deal." Basically, though, I think what Justin Trudeau is today is relieved, and that's certainly what came through when he talked about how difficult it was to get this deal at all.
This is an extraordinarily complex agreement, just as the original NAFTA was. But let me sum up what it means. It means that when this agreement is enacted, NAFTA will be preserved, updated, modernized, and stabilized for the 21st century, as we set out to do. It means Canadian workers and their families will enjoy greater opportunities than ever before. And more prosperity means more resources to invest in things like housing, healthcare, and a more secure retirement for our seniors.
And that's not just rhetoric. He's right. Justin Trudeau is correct. Prosperity is what this deal is all about for Canada, because 3/4 of the country's exports go to North America, mostly the U.S. $600 billion in trade of that $1.2 billion that Donald Trump mentioned. The key was giving President Trump something he wanted in exchange for something Canada could keep. And that's what the dairy sector was all about. President Trump kept talking about it over the past few months, saying that U.S. farmers were not getting a good deal. Right now, though, we're going to, I think, in Ottawa, just let this sink in. There will be objections raised in the days and months ahead. But the general consensus seems to be that this deal, even if it has its problems, is much better than no deal.
Daniel Lack with the latest from Toronto. Daniel, thank you.